and welcome to Understanding Shakespeare. This week we're going to continue talking about Romeo and Juliet. We'll be talking about Act 1. Act 1 has 5 scenes and we're going to go through them one at a time. In Scene 1, we learn how much the Capulets and the Montagues truly hate one another. The scene starts off with a pair of Montagues talking about what they'd like to do to the Capulets, which is not particularly nice. We're talking about hurting them, killing them, even raping some of their women. So this is a very serious rivalry.
What's up, brah? What, brah?
In fact, a fight even breaks out in this scene between the very hot-headed Tybalt of the Capulet family and the much more relaxed Benvolio of the Montague family. This fight is luckily stopped by the prince before anyone is hurt because essentially he's tired of them messing up his stuff. So once Tybalt and the prince and everyone have gone off stage, we're left with Romeo's mother, Mrs. Montague, and Benvolio. And Mrs. Montague is talking to Benvolio about how she's very concerned about her son because he's terribly depressed and nobody seems to know why. So Benvolio agrees to talk to Romeo about it the next time he sees him, which turns out to be right then. As Benvolio talks to him, we learn that Romeo is absolutely in love with a girl. Not Juliet, he hasn't met her yet. Rosalind, who doesn't love him back, and that's how we end Scene 1. Going into Scene 2, we meet Paris, who's asking Juliet's father, Mr. Capulet, for Juliet's hand in marriage. Mr. Capulet is very concerned because he feels that Juliet is far too young to get married. She's only 13.
Won't somebody please think of the children?
Paris brings up that there's girls younger than her that are already mothers. Mr. Capulet isn't entirely buying this argument, but he does agree to let Paris come and meet Juliet at a party he's throwing to see if they hit it off. Now is a good time to address a common misconception that people have. Sometimes people think that the age of marriage was much younger in Elizabethan times. This in fact is not true at all. The average age of marriage in Elizabethan times was 27. That is only 1 year younger than the average age of marriage in the United States today. Now it is true that sometimes in noble families, children would get engaged or even married very young. But that was absolutely not the norm. It's much like how nowadays teen pregnancy does exist, but it's not the norm. So Shakespeare's audience would have reacted to Juliet's young age of 13 much in the same way that we do today. Now back in Scene 2, once Paris is left, Mr. Capulet is sending out invitations to his party. Now unfortunately, he sends them out with a servant who can't read. Gold star, Papa Capulet. Gold star. Luckily for this servant, he runs into Romeo and Benvolio, who he does not recognize as Montagues, so he asks them for help reading the guest list, which Benvolio and Romeo do. Once the servant leaves, they both decide to attend the party. Romeo wants to go because he saw Rosalind's name on the guest list, and Benvolio wants to go because he thinks that maybe if Romeo saw a couple more girls, he wouldn't be quite so hung up on this Rosalind. Now it's important to note that we're already seeing fate intervening in Romeo and Juliet's lives, this time in the form of an illiterate servant. The role of fate in the party is even foreshadowed by a quote that Mr. Capulet says to Paris when he's describing his party. He says, "At my poor house look to behold this night earth-treading stars that make dark heaven light." All he thinks he's saying is, man, this is gonna be a killer party. But in reality, he's foreshadowing the fated meeting of Romeo and Juliet. Now, in Scene 3, we finally meet Juliet, and we learn that she doesn't entirely feel like she's ready for marriage. We also meet the nurse, who spends the whole time making dirty jokes and only stops when Juliet or her mother beg her to. We also meet Juliet's mother, Mrs. Capulet, who feels that Juliet should go ahead and go meet Paris in case they get along.
Go on, honey. Take a chance.
In Scene 4, Romeo rolls up to the party with his friends Benvolio and Mercutio. Now at this point, Romeo is still moping about Rosalind, and Mercutio, who has had enough of this,
Shut up! Shut up! Shut up!
launches into his famous Queen Mab speech. Now the first time you hear the Queen Mab speech, it may sound like gibberish. In fact, Romeo says something of that effect to Mercutio. The Queen Mab speech is all about a very small, very sexual fairy. And if we look at what was being talked about just previous to this speech, we can see why Mercutio is talking about this fairy. Romeo was talking about this dream that he'd had of Rosalind. Mercutio is comparing Romeo's dream to this fairy. This very tiny and insignificant fairy. He's also trying to trivialize Romeo's love by saying, Basically, it's all just sex. Queen Mab is a creation of Shakespeare's, and this is the first time that she shows up in literature, but it certainly won't be the last, because she captures the imaginations of a lot of other writers and starts showing up in everything from poetry to short stories all the way up to the present-day TV show True Blood. In scene 5, the party is in full swing. Juliet's father, Mr. Capulet, is having a great time and really encouraging everyone else to do the same. In the midst of all this partying, Romeo sees Juliet for the first time and immediately falls absolutely head over heels in love with her. He starts spouting poetry, saying things like, "Did my heart love till now, forswear its sight, for I ne'er saw true beauty till this night." Now, unfortunately for him, while he's busy spouting poetry and falling in love with Juliet, Tybalt, a Capulet, recognizes his voice. Romeo's been safe up to this point because he's been masked, but the minute that Tybalt recognizes his voice, he is ready to fight and even kill Romeo. Now, luckily for Romeo, Mr. Capulet steps in, who doesn't want any fighting at his party, and essentially tells Tybalt to back off. Tybalt eventually agrees to do so, but does leave swearing his revenge. Meanwhile, Romeo and Juliet are flirting up a storm. They are both immediately besotted with one another, and by the end of their conversation have already kissed. Twice.
You guys should get a room, man.
As they're parted, not having caught one another's names, they go ahead and ask Juliet's nurse who each other is. It is at this point that they find out that they are mortal enemies. And that is how scene 5 ends, with the two of them being absolutely shocked and dismayed to find out who the other person is. So one of the big questions that gets raised in this act that continues throughout the play that I want you to keep thinking of is, are Romeo and Juliet in love, or is it only lust? It's just the end of Act 1, but there's already a lot against them in the lust category. First of all, it's emphasized to us several times that they're both very young. Juliet is only 13 and Romeo is only thought to be about 17 or 18. Also, they've changed their minds awfully quickly. Just a scene ago, Juliet was talking about how she wasn't ready for marriage, and Romeo was in love with someone else.
I love lamp. Do you really love the lamp, or are you just saying it because you saw it?
Finally, they fall in love with one another very quickly, literally at first sight. However, there are some things going for them in the love category. First of all, we're about to see them give up a lot to be with one another. They're about to give up their family, their friends, and eventually their lives, which is an awful lot to give up if it's only lust. Secondly, and this is important, Romeo's poetry. A lot of times Shakespeare tells us things about a character or a situation, not just by what they say, but by how they say it.
Do you understand the words that are coming out of my mouth?
When Romeo is in love with Rosaline, his poetry is terrible. I mean, it is horrible. He says things like, "Oh brawling love, oh loving hate," and "She is too fair, too wise, wisely too fair, to merit bliss by making me despair." His rhymes and analogies are often very obvious and heavy-handed, but the moment that he falls in love with Juliet, his poetry turns into some of the most beautiful poetry we have today.
Oh my God, it's so beautiful.
He says things like, "Oh, she doth teach the torches to burn bright. It seems she hangs upon the cheek of night, like a rich jewel in an Ethiop's ear, beauty too rich for use, for earth too dear." And, "My lips to blushing pilgrims ready stand, to smooth that rough touch with a tender kiss." Shakespeare may be trying to tell us that Romeo's love for Juliet, like his poetry, is beautiful and true. And when Shakespeare tells us something, it's important to listen. So as the play continues, I want you to keep thinking about, are Romeo and Juliet in love, or is it just lust? That's it for Act 1. Next week we'll be talking about Act 2 of Romeo and Juliet.